of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Federal Reserve jacking up the interest rates another 0.75%. And I'm going, is it that the Fed wants to destroy the economy? Is it that they want to slam on the brakes with both feet and screech the car down the road till it gets off into the ditch? Because that's the only thing I'm thinking of this fast to continue to raise interest rates. And then they're talking about more in the next two meetings, maybe another 1.25% increase. I got to tell you, I think our inflation isn't because of this. And I think the damage that they're going to do, look, I'm not an economist, but it seems a bit aggressive. In fact, the last time the Fed did something like this, 1990 brought us massive recession. In fact, actually, harmed H.W. Bush pretty substantially, which kind of makes me go, and this may sound a bit conspiratorial, and I'm sure that this isn't the sole bit of thinking, but there's part of me that goes, there are those in the wealth class that want recession. In fact, if you watch some of the YouTube, the Instagram, TikTok video commentators, some of the rich people who claim to be rich, they say that we desperately need a recession, to get things back in order. And, the more I see that frame being laid out in front of me, the more I hear the wealth class saying, we need to get things back the way, where they used to be. Kind of makes me go, well, is this really more about getting workers back into line with all the organizing going on, with Teamsters marching in Seattle on Amazon? Is this to make people, hurt, make them desperate, make them pliable again? So, force them back to work. Because, I happened to watch Fred Smith, the founder and head poncho over at FedEx. And he was on one of the talking head business shows talking about how, Biden created this inflation with, the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act and, the college forgiveness. He's creating all this inflation. And you go, wait a second, but the Inflation Reduction Act, they haven't spent a dime on that yet. How is that caused the inflation of the last year? Well, because it isn't. This is greed driven. This is driven by a supply chain that's been severely broken because it was ill-conceived from the beginning. This is a whole bunch of problems, all coming together, the perfect storm, to where they only feel they have one tool, and that is to smash the economy with massive interest rate hikes and fast, because it's about getting, people getting back to work, and getting them back to work for what? Well, desperation, poverty, wages. Don't have them asking for better wages, hours, conditions. Don't give them the ability to change jobs. So for me, a big part of this has to do with getting things back the way they used to be. Where people were just glad to have a job, just lucky to have a job. You remember that frame? We're going through the Great Resignation right now, where the right to work states are losing their minds with people leaving jobs. And as I talked about recently, the Wallet Hub folks said, the 9 of the top 10 states that have the highest resignation rates, the quit rates, the people who say, take this job and shove it, those are no rights at work states. Mostly in the South, but, across the Southwest. And why? Because people have had enough. And when I see people like Fred Smith out there going, hey, It's Biden's fault. It's all these policies that are going to bring manufacturing back, that are going to invest in our infrastructure, that are going to help us deal with climate change, that are putting us on the path, I believe, towards prosperity and away from the last 40 years of supply side voodoo Reaganomics and neoliberal horrible. And this is on both sides of the aisle. The fact that we're talking about reshoring manufacturing, investing in infrastructure, clean technologies, and, oh, by the way, the most important part of it, workers organizing for collective bargaining rights to share in the wealth that their labor creates. Because you go back to when we think about the good old days, the Leave It to Beaver era, the Mayberry era, that was built on strong government investment, high taxation on the wealthy, and strong labor unions to demand a fair share of the wealth that their labor creates. That is the 1950s and 60s. That's what built the most prosperous working class in history. That was the model. And it was global because we set that up around the world. Just like we set up this race to the bottom. We've done this globally. I think it's important that this administration be recognized for trying to move us away from that area. But it's incumbent on us. Elections matter. So when I see this, I got to ask the question. Is this about, at least in part, slamming on the brakes, causing the crisis, causing the recession that the wealthy want? Because what the wealthy understand is when recession hits, the working class of this country is cash poor. They can't weather a crisis. So they're desperate and pliable. And oh, by the way, tons of wealth to be made. I was watching one of the videos going, now's the time to get cash rich. Now's the time to hold on to all your cash so that when the recession hits, you can buy up assets cheap. Because that's how rich people stay rich. They never sell their houses. They never sell their property. They never sell. They hold on to because they know over time it's going to appreciate. But when bad times hit, well, that means you lose your home. Your family loses its home. And someone who's cash rich, they get to come in and buy it up cheap. Your loss, their gain. And that's how our economy's been structured for far too long. And I'm saying, we're at a moment where we can change that. But we're one, maybe two elections away from, being right back in the heart of that horrible. So to me, that's why it's part of the reason we're doing the Working Class Heroes Tour. We're going to be kicking that off on September 30th. It's part of the reason we need to have these conversations and hammer this stuff out. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You got any other ideas on why the Fed is slamming on the brakes? Look, I understand it's the tool that they have to try and bring things a little bit, but wow, this aggressively, I got to tell you, I think the medicine will probably kill the patient in this view. Anyway, today I had the honor and the privilege on one of our affiliate stations, WCPT AM 820, to be part of a diversity, equity, and inclusion panel. The old straight white guy on the diversity and equity and inclusion panel. Yeah, I fit in like a giant red thumb. And look, and as I said, the reality is the reason I think these things are important is from a labor guy's perspective. We get sliced and diced and pitted against each other on every front. Male, female, white, black, gay, straight, this religion, that religion, however they can figure out to pit us against each other. So we don't ask for better wages, hours, conditions. Because for me, everything comes back to the kitchen table. Everything comes back to, can you support your family? Can you keep a roof over your family's head? Can you prepare for your children to grow up and go to college? And can you lead a decent life? And can the work that you do, fund that? I believe we can have a system that does that. But as long as we're pitted against each other, not going to happen. And you go back to our labor history, and one of the things I talked about is, in the South, at the end of slavery, what they did is they passed laws to lock black people up for no reason. Oh, well, you were standing around. Go to jail. And they would give them lengthy jail sentences. And then the states had these least convict agreements where they would lease out these people that they arrested for chumped up nonsense, and they would use them to break strikes. So the white workers who were in the mines going, "Hey, we want better wages, hours, conditions," their strikes were being broken up by people who didn't have a choice. But it was that visual, that division that caused them to hate each other. And look, they were both going to the bottom. And the people cashing in, well, the folks in the ivory tower. So for me, again, it's never the issue. I never look at the issue from the right-left frame, from the black-white frame. And as I said, look, I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, a minority in a minority community. We used to play a neat game, and I said this. We played a neat game. It's called Chase the White Kid and Beat Him Up. I'm sure it was a fun game had I not been the white kid. And I always joke because I joke that I'm half black. The other half at the time was blue. Because I got beat up a lot. Get it? Black and blue? Yeah. But I did realize at a very young age, and this is where the point is, that black and white didn't matter as much as green. The color that mattered most was green, and neither of us had it. We were both broke. And while we were supposed to be pitted against each other, when you don't have food at the end of the month, when you're worried about keeping the roof over your head, that division on race doesn't seem to matter as much. But you start moving up the economic ladder where we're creating the Hunger Games, where we're going, hey, if they win, you have to lose. This is where the division happens, and this is where we need to start coming together. And this was my point while being the straight white guy on the panel. This is why it's important. We have to put these differences aside if we're going to move forward as workers, as a country, as a citizen. We don't always have to agree individually, but as a matter of the country moving forward, we have to come together. And the workplace for me is that place where we do it. And I told the story. Look, 30 years ago, we had someone who was transgender back then. And do you know who cared? Nobody. This person went, and we'll say his name was Ron at the time. Ron went away, was gone a couple of months. Ron came back, was Rana. Nobody cared because, well, got to keep their job. Did the same job, made the same wages, lived their life. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Nobody cared. Now, did people talk behind your back? Yeah. But they talked behind his back too, because that's what we do. Individually, you're not going to change hearts and minds in the moment. But institutionally, that's where we have to move forward. So it's one of those things. Now, again, you're always going to have people pitted against each other, like this story coming out of Michigan. There's a guy running for Congress who's caught everyone's attention in this day. His name is John Gibbs. Black guy, went to Stanford. But while he was at Stanford, he founded, I guess, a think tank, if you want to call it that. The Society for the Critique of Feminism, I guess, is what it was, and it argued that you women folk, you don't have the characteristics necessary to govern. Sorry. You just don't have it in you. Sorry, men are smarter than women. This is the black gentleman making his assertion again, dividing us, not just on black white, but male female, because he didn't make the argument that black women couldn't govern. He said all women, and he's kind of taking a shot for it now because, well, he's running for Congress. Now, will this matter to the MAGA crowd? Doubt it. But it is interesting to see how individually we're able to pick and choose, where institutionally, I think we all understand. Women and men, they've got different skills, different talents, but neither is better or worse at governing. We could argue we're all bad at it, especially when our Republican friends who write nonsense like this at made-up think tanks think that they know how to govern best, which is to destroy. Anyway, love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. Going to take a quick break. Right back on the other side. Going to talk a little bit about the little announcement that came out of New York today. Something came out of New York. Maybe we'll figure that out. Right back after this. Stick around.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, Manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, President of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Indigenous people have been saying that we feel a shift in the climate for decades. Climate change is here. The time is now to pass the torch on to the next generation of clean energy warriors. We need to put the land back to work for our people. That means creating jobs for them to live and thrive in our communities. The time is now. Congress must invest in clean energy.
It takes a lot to raise a family. A good job, a good salary, and some patience. A lot of people my age are drowning in college debt, but I chose a different path. I'm a member of the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I work hard for my job, and I love what I do. I had a lot of choices for my future, but I made the best choice for my family. IBEW, the right choice.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm guessing someone's going to take someone's going to have some problem with Mr. Gibbs' comment that that women are not as smart as men and can't govern. Let's go to the phones and let's. I'm sure Alice is going to have a thought on this. Alice, what do you make of this? Are women just dumb? Is that the point?
Obviously, the man is deluded, and he knows nothing of history.
So we have a problem
Not
with
a
that.
thing. Oh, I have a problem with it. A big problem. Apparently, he knows nothing of history. Of course, you know, we've been indulging in this revisionist history, you know, for a couple of centuries. But when you look back and take away the revisionism, there was actually a period of for about 2,000 years in the Middle East, where Turkey and whatnot, where it was ruled by women for over 2,000 years, and there was absolutely no war. And then, of course, you know, some of the steppe tribes came in that were patriarchs and took over. But obviously, he knows nothing.
Alice, shh. Shh. Not allowed to say that because they weren't Americans.
I don't care. I can trace my heritage back. Can he? See, now I'm going to pull out that elite card because I'll do that every once in a while.
All right. We got the word from the elitist. I got you, Alice. You're pulling the elite card. I got it.
Well, you know, I have the ancestry. I don't have the money, but I do have the ancestry and the education, so there you are.
Good stuff. Appreciate it, Alice. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
I would hope, and this is one of those moments where you hope that women would take offense to that and then go vote. See, because voting is the way to, you know, in this country, we express ourselves. Now, remember the stories of Al Capone? You know, murder, mafia, you know, crime, all that stuff. It was the IRS that took down Al Capone. No, none of the other criming that went on. Interesting to kind of bring that up in this moment. And also interesting to remember that Rick Scott, if you remember Rick Scott's 11-point plan, he wants to cut the IRS by half. You know, the richest guy in the Senate wanting to cut the IRS. It kind of makes you wonder. So also, remember when Hillary and Donald Trump were in the debates and she pointed out that he had paid no federal income tax for a bunch of years and Trump didn't bother to deny it. In fact, said that makes him smart. Remember that? Well, today the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, has charged that Trump, his adult children, the Trump organization, all of them were involved in what they are saying expansive fraud that lasted over a decade that Trump himself doth launch. And, you know, some of the stories coming out of it, you go, well, you know, they're just piling on. You go, One of the stories that caught my attention is they were saying some of his properties he had overvalued. And I know people say, well, we all overvalue our property a little bit. Yeah, so that we can get the loan to, refinance our house. And look, they all do a little bit. But some of his properties, 3,300%. So I was thinking about this today. I'm going, okay, because understand, this is what rich people get away with all the time. So the good thing is, while I don't think anything's going to come out of this for Trump, maybe a slap on the wrist, maybe a fine, who knows. But I think this is an opportunity to look at what rich people all across the board get away with, and we don't hold accountable. Think about this. If you had, let's say, a $1,000 house, and that you overinflated that $1,000 house 3,300%, you would have a boatload of money, right? Right? You'd have $3.3 million. Just around that area, right? So what if you, I don't know. What if you said, I'm going to take out a loan against that $3 million home, and I'm going to take, $2.5 million out in equity. Now remember, the house is worth $1,000. You're going to take out this massive loan. And then you could file bankruptcy. They can have the house. You got all this money. Who pays for that? Oh, it's the banks. No, it's you. It's me. The banks don't lose money. They just pass the costs on to everyone else. Also understand, Trump was giving away land and buildings and stuff in charitable fashions so that they could write it off. Because again, it's about minimizing the tax liability. In those years that they pay nothing, some of this stuff happens. And it makes him look good. It makes him look philanthropic. He's giving away land. And rich people do this stuff, giving away assets that they massively overvalue, and then they get to write it off. So you wonder how rich people don't pay taxes. You wonder how they get away with all this stuff. They play these kind of games that nobody never holds them accountable. Now remember, I brought up Rick Scott and his 11-point plan. This idea that he can then gut the IRS by half so that nobody ever bothers to look into that. Nobody ever bothers to hold these people accountable for the things that they're getting away with. I mean, it's really insane when you stop and think about it. But we allow it to happen, and we don't bother. We don't bother because, well, we're too busy looking at each other. That's the part that gets me. It just is what it is. Let's go to the phone lines. Got MJ on the line. MJ, how are we doing today?
Rick, thank you so much for taking my call, and I love the topic that you guys are talking about, education. And I believe that so much is being impacted at education is that we don't have proper funding for it, and we really need to put more funding into education. I don't know, in Colorado where I used to live, they had a lot of the education funded from the cannabis industry, and so a lot of these states don't have that, and it's not federally, regulated or legal yet. So that's one thought. But I think what's happening with all these schools in the South, and particularly the red states, is it's being really impacted by theology and theocracy. And so they're nominating all these very, very, very far-right individuals to be on the school boards. And so that's where they're starting to really take the whole thing of banning books put in place. And I know it's something for educators like your guest, Irene, is having difficulty dealing with that, I'm sure, at the college level because of the whole loan forgiveness thing has been kind of thrown like a match into a firebox. So I understand that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always been my view that you don't fund education through gimmicks and through vices. It should be something that we fund as a matter of course, not because of gambling winnings like we do in Ohio or pot like they do, like you said, in Colorado. We should be doing it as a matter of course. I'm with you, MJ. I appreciate the thoughts. Thanks.
Hey, thank you.
Good stuff. Seriously, I mean, at the end of the day, we really need to prioritize. And, oh, by the way, start taxing the wealthy again, especially people like Trump. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Calling all builders. all welders and roofers, engineers and electricians, calling all brick masons and boiler makers, steel workers and steam fitters. Your country is calling you to rebuild America, to create a cleaner, safer, more prosperous future for all. Tackling climate change, this is the job of our lifetime. It's time to build back better. Let's get to work.
Corn Pops, Fruit Loops, Rice Krispies, with a side of paper plates and napkins.
We love the country. The country's in trouble. It's got to be solved fairly quickly.
When you're with your My Pillow, you got my phone.
My name is Linda Paulson, Republican and awesome.
That if you have a dude that is wearing makeup, they need to be confronted and say, that's wrong. Why don't you just work on maybe getting your testosterone levels up a little bit? I do wear makeup.
I want a very big, capable airplane.
What has any fifth grader done to have made the world better because he or she is in it?
I'm just glad to be in a room where I'm one of the oldest people.
As a female adult, I know what a woman is.
You just keep talking about cows and meat all day long.
Republicans will let kids just be kids.
See, I'm getting emotional.
It comes with an NFT, a token version as well.
Still don't get that.
And my pronouns are patriot and ass kicker.
A dream that I had 10 years ago where I was in my dream. How many of you guys have dreams?
I got eagle bumps. We don't get goosebumps here.
I hollered, I loved him. He stopped and he said, I love you too. And then he said, this guy says he loves me. And I said, wait, I'm a woman.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Bob sent me an email during the break that he says the whole case against Trump is fraudulent itself. That's the real fraud, Bob says. That this is a political witch hunt, again, his words. And I think he's been watching Trump a little bit. And I guess, to Trump's credit, he's not going to sit back and defend himself. He's going to go out on the Hannity show and attack. And I say, good on you, Don. Keep it up. Keep shooting the mouth off. As my grandfather always said, you have the right to remain silent. Maybe you should use it. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on these fraud charges brought by Letitia James, the Attorney General there in New York. I've asked Chris Hahn to come talk with us. He's a syndicated radio host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
Anytime.
So it's a witch hunt. It's a fraud on the fraud case. What do you think of Bob's assertions?
Yeah, Bob, they keep finding all these witches. So if it is a witch hunt, it's going well for the hunters of the witches. Particularly if by witch you mean fraud and crimes and abuse of power, because that's what it is. And, here's the thing that struck me today in the last hour or two, where I really was kind of focusing on this, getting ready for your show. Twice today, both by Letitia James and by the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, it was said that presidents of the United States, former presidents of the United States, are no different than anyone else, and frankly, in the eyes of the law. And frankly, that is the way we always thought things would be in this country. No man or woman is above the law. No man should get special treatment because of their office, their wealth, their birth. And Donald Trump has consistently tried to assert that he should be treated differently. And Judge Cannon down in Florida asserted that he should be treated differently. thank God some judicial sanity has set in Florida today with the 11th Circuit's opinion on the document case. And of course, Letitia James said the same thing earlier today, that the president of the United States should not be treated different, former president of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, and I said this a moment ago, they got Al Capone, the IRS got Al Capone for all his crimes. Could this be what they finally get him on? But doesn't this, and Billy Barr was out there saying that, well, the case isn't all that strong. He doesn't think it's gonna lead to anything. But they're dragging in the children, Christopher, like Don and Eric and Ivanka are like 6-year-olds, but they're dragging in the children. How low do you have to be to drag in the children? Children who are executives in the company.
Yeah, I mean, Don Corleone, Sonny Corleone got shot on the causeway. It is the children are part of the family business there, unfortunately. And yeah, I genuinely don't like it when the children of politicians get dragged into the political fight. But when one of them worked in the White House, the other one was the president of his company or a director of his company. I'm sorry, you're dragged in. You're part of the scheme. You are a knowing participant. And it's not like they're 10 years old. They are grown-ass men and women. And they are perfectly capable of saying, no, daddy, and moving on from it. But they did not. So, yes. And look, I don't know what he meant by she doesn't have a case. This is not a criminal case. He will not go to jail for this. This is a civil case. You do not need to be proven guilty by a reasonable doubt in a civil case. The rule in a civil case is preponderance of evidence, meaning more likely than not that a crime was committed, or a tort in this case, or a civil rule being broken. I don't know. I didn't read the entire brief. It's 200 pages long. I don't think Bill Barr read it either. It's 200 pages long. Seems to me that she wouldn't be bringing this case if she didn't think she had a preponderance of evidence. It would be, I think, political, misconduct, malpractice by her to do that.
Right. Now, again, you look at this and, there are those who are saying, well, why isn't this a criminal indictment? If this is fraudulent, if he committed fraud, why doesn't she bring criminal charges? Now, it's my understanding she's the Attorney General. That's not their job. That's the district attorney's jobs, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, in certain cases, there are criminal crimes that can be brought by the Attorney General. But it's clear to me, look, they have a pretty good track record in the New York State Attorney General's office of getting convictions against Donald Trump in civil cases. He cannot operate his charity anymore in New York. Had to pay $2 million to real charities in New York because of how he misused his foundation to fund his own stuff. So, civil cases, I think people have to understand this about Donald Trump. It's going to be very hard to ever send him to jail. You and I have been talking about this for a couple of years now, I think. I don't think he's ever going to jail.
I agree. Never going to happen.
Right. But, one of the things he loves is being rich and having his names on buildings. And in New York particularly, there are many buildings with his name on it, some of which, the co-op boards are kicking the name off of, but many of which he owns outright or his company owns. For him to have to sell off his New York assets, as much as he wants to downplay his ties to New York these days, Donald Trump is a born and raised New Yorker who always wanted to make it in New York. And removing his names from buildings in New York and not allowing him to do business in New York anymore is going to be like putting him in jail in a lot of ways. And it will be a sad day for him.
Yeah, I mean, the legacy, not quite what he was hoping for, but
No. I almost feel bad about it. If I didn't think he was such a horrible person trying to destroy this country, I'd almost feel bad for him. But I don't.
Yeah, no.
You're looking at me like, what do you mean, Joe? Not really.
No, because I've had a couple of conversations with people today and go, well, what's the big deal? One of the main crimes that they claim he committed is overinflating the value of his properties.
Yes.
And it sounds innocuous enough. Oh, okay, everyone wants to get a little bit more out of their properties. But when you start looking at it, one of the numbers, 3,300% he inflated properties, you go, that's a little bit more than just a little bit.
Yeah, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. He said that Mar-a-Lago was worth $750 million. It's worth $75 million. He said his apartment in New York City was 30,000 square feet. It's 10,000 square feet. 10,000 square feet is still a huge apartment. It'd be a huge house. It's still a very valuable asset, but it's not the asset he said. And the crime is that he went to banks and said, give me a loan based on this. And yes, people, I look, is it a common thing that people do when they're talking about their real estate? Because you don't really know what your real estate is worth at any given time. The market fluctuates. So you have some wiggle room in estimating what your real estate, you don't have 350% wiggle room
or 3,300%.
You know how big it is. You know the difference between 10,000 and 30,000 square feet. That's an outright lie. And that is something that he used to try to make more money and to make himself richer and to defraud banks.
Yeah. So what do you say to the people who go, well, who cares? It's just the banks. Who cares if the banks get defrauded? What's that got to do with me?
What it has to do with you is this man wants to be president of the United States again. And I think it's kind of important for people to understand what a fraud he is. And I get it. You had your guy, write you today on Twitter or Facebook, telling you why he's not a fraud. And there's some people who are going to just believe him no matter what. But elections in this country are won on the margins. You don't have to convince everyone that he's a fraud who's voted for him. If 1 or 2 or 3% of Trump voters say, I'm done with this guy, he's done. It's over. Can't win. I mean, how many votes did he win? How many votes did he win Pennsylvania by in 2016? It was like less than 100,000 votes. Biden won Pennsylvania by less than 100,000 votes. 50,000 votes is all you really need there, right? So it's telling people the truth, showing the fraud that he is to more Americans and keeping them reminded of that. I think it's important. And more importantly than all of that politics that I just went through, no person is above the law.
Yeah. No. But
and he should be treated no differently.
But I go back to the 2016 debates when Hillary, pointed at him that he doesn't pay taxes, and he said that makes him smart. This is how he doesn't pay taxes. So for me, this is what rich people get away with all the time. So the fact that we're seeing this, you said that nobody's above the law. Yes, they are constantly. And I look at Rick Scott, one of the richest guys in the Senate, wanting to gut the IRS in half. Yeah. I'm going, this all plays into this. So that kind of anger that you see in the working class because people are struggling.
Well, he wants to gut the IRS in half, but he wants to make sure that you and I pay more taxes.
Exactly. So, this is one of those moments where you go, there is a difference. The wealthy in this country continue to get away with things. And while the courts may say everyone's the same, we both know they're not.
Yeah, I mean, I got it. But, a lot of rich people go to jail every day. A lot of rich people get brought before courts, and they can't say, well, I'm the president. You can't accuse me of a crime. I mean, his argument in Florida, I know we're going back and forth between two cases here, but I'm much more interested in the Mar-a-Lago raid, if you will. His argument in Florida, which Judge Cannon accepted, was, if you do a criminal investigation of me, it will do irreparable harm. I'm sorry, criminal investigations do irreparable harm to everyone who gets investigated criminally. That's the point.
I got to tell you, though, while I'm not a Donald Trump fan by any stretch of the imagination, you kind of have to be in awe of the audacity, the giant stones on this guy to pull the stuff that he's pulled over the years and continues to do.
It's amazing. You're right. I am in awe of the cojones on this man. But I am more in awe of the fact that, man, that was real Long Island to me. I mean, it's getting late for me. I'm like not a guy who's like talking this late, unless I do a couple of Red Bulls. And you're like in that zone where I could still go to sleep. I could still be up. Like if I'm doing a midnight hit on TV, I'm Red Bulling it. I'm wide awake and I can't go back to sleep till like 3 o'clock in the morning. But I got a 9:30 hit with you, and I'm like, I could probably make it and then go to sleep afterwards. Let me do it. But the Long Island comes out when I'm tired. But I even lost my train of thought now. But it's amazing to me how this man gets away with it. But it's more amazing to me how people support him still and send him money to fight the lawsuits and the criminal investigations against him. It is amazing to me that still happens. Yep. That there's a working man right now, a guy driving a truck like you do, like my dad did for 40 years as a Teamster. They're out there working, and they're sending their hard-earned money to this guy who's supposed to be a freaking billionaire. And they're sending him their hard-earned money. And they will continue to do that in the face of overwhelming information of his history of criminal and fraudulent activity. And they will continue to do that. Plus, if he's really as rich as he says he is, why does he need your $5 a month? That to me, I got to tell you, that to me is the worst part about this guy. It's the worst thing.
No, look, he's going to tell you. He's smart. He's got other people paying his bills. OPM, man, other people's money. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Chris Hahn, syndicated radio host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. You want to check out his stuff, ChristopherHahn.com. We'll get links out on social media. Now, you're talking about Mar-a-Lago and the raid. And look, we've found out recently how much, classified documents he's had, how he's misused it since he left the White House. I want to know, how much did he do while he was in the White House? If this is what he did when he left, what did he do while he was there?
Well, unfortunately, when he's there, he can do whatever he wants, right? He's the president of the United States, and he is the ultimate declassifier, right? He's the ultimate authority on what is and isn't classified. Now, I am a big believer that we classify far too much in this country, and we probably should, the public and the people should have more access to more things so we know what's going on. But that said, I doubt he ever declassified anything formally. And that's a big red herring, a big bluff, a big lie.
I thought he waved his hands. Isn't that what Cash Patel said? Some kind of
order. I
some
had
kind
a
of magic
order that I only told myself. It's just, it's, first of all, a document itself is not classified. It's the information on that document. And you must assume that information exists